Most people think they're standing in line for their breakthrough, that life is holding something just out of reach, that one day, when the conditions are right, when the timing is perfect, when the world finally agrees, they'll win. But that belief alone is the reason the door feels closed. Because the truth is this: you are not waiting to win. You've already won. The mistake we make is assuming that life begins on the outside and moves inward. That's circumstances change first, and then we feel successful, confident, fulfilled. But life works in the opposite direction. Every outcome is born internally before it ever shows itself externally. Every victory is decided in consciousness before it appears as fact. The moment you desired what you desire, the end was already implied. Desire does not tease, it reveals. It does not mock, it informs. You didn't imagine the win because you might get it. You imagined it because it already exists for you to accept. So when you say, "I'm waiting," what you're really saying is, "I haven't yet allowed myself to be the person who already has." And identity is everything. The world doesn't respond to your hopes. It doesn't respond to your wishes. It responds to your assumptions. Who do you assume yourself to be when no one is watching? The one chasing or the one choosing? Because the winner does not live in anticipation. The winner lives in quiet knowing. Winning is not loud. It's calm. It's settled. It's the absence of desperation. When you truly know something is yours, you stop begging life to prove it. You stop forcing doors. You stop arguing with the present moment. You move differently, not because you're pretending, but because you're aligned. And that alignment has a feeling of ease, a feeling of course, a feeling of inevitability. That feeling is the signal. That feeling is the acceptance. That feeling is the moment the seed becomes law. The outer world may lag behind, but it must follow. So if things look unchanged right now, don't panic. You're not behind. You're not late. You're not failing. You're simply witnessing the echo. And echoes always come after the sound. Your job is not to wrestle reality into submission. Your job is to remain loyal to what you know, even when appearances disagree. Rest in the assumption, walk in the certainty, live as the one who has already crossed the finish line, because the race was never physical. The battle was never external. The moment you claimed it within, the moment you stopped waiting, the moment you decided, you won. The end is already decided. Even though the world trains us to believe that life is being written moment by moment, as if the future is uncertain and outcomes are fragile. But uncertainty only exists when we view life from the outside in. From the inside out, everything is already complete. What you call the future is not something forming ahead of you. It is something that already exists, waiting to be entered through awareness. The moment a desire rises within you, it is not announcing a possibility, it is revealing a reality that already has form. Desire does not come to create, it comes to claim. We misunderstand time and assume it is the source of change. We say, "It will happen one day," as if days and months are responsible for fulfillment. But time does nothing on its own. It only unveils what consciousness has already accepted as true. That is why some people wait years for what others seem to step into effortlessly. The difference is not luck or timing, but inner decision. One accepted the end as real long before there was evidence. The other kept postponing belief until proof appeared. When the end is already decided, effort takes on a different meaning. Action is no longer a way to force an outcome, but a natural expression of alignment. You don't move to make something happen. You move because something has already happened within you. This is why struggle often produces resistance. Struggle implies doubt. It implies that the outcome is still in question. But once the end is accepted, struggle dissolves into certainty, and certainty moves with quiet authority. The outer world may still show unfinished scenes, but these are not indicators of failure. They are transitional frames, remnants of previous assumptions playing themselves out. To react to them as final is to forget that the ending has already been chosen. When you understand this, patience becomes effortless, not because you're waiting, but because you know. Knowing removes urgency. It replaces anxiety with calm expectancy. the kind that doesn't ask if but simply observes when. This is where faith becomes practical rather than emotional. Faith is not hoping that things will work out. It is living as though the outcome is already settled. It is refusing to renegotiate the ending every time appearances challenge you. When you remain faithful to the end internally, the external must eventually conform, not because you demanded it, but because it has no alternative. Reality has no choice but to mirror the state you consistently occupy. To live from the end is to reverse the entire logic of cause and effect. You don't wait for success to feel fulfilled. Fulfillment gives rise to success. You don't wait for freedom to feel secure. Security produces freedom. The end is not a reward at the finish line, it is the starting point. And once you see that the finish line already exists, you stop running in circles trying to reach it. You simply step into it. Everything you experience is arranged around the idea you hold of yourself, whether you are conscious of it or not. Life does not respond to what you want, what you say, or even what you do, as much as it responds to who you assume yourself to be. Identity is the quiet author behind every circumstance. Before anything shows up as an event, a relationship, an opportunity, or an obstacle, it first exists as a self-concept. Change the concept and the story must change with it. Most people try to modify circumstances directly. They work harder, wait longer, or attempt to control outcomes, believing that success will eventually grant them a new identity. But identity never follows circumstances. Circumstances follow ID, entity. The world rearranges itself to confirm your inner definition of self. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, life provides situations that require struggle. If you see yourself as overlooked, reality mirrors neglect, not because the world is cruel, but because it is obedient. Assumption is powerful precisely because it operates silently. You do not need to affirm loudly or visualize constantly for it to work. The assumptions you live from reveal themselves in your reactions, expectations, and emotional defaults. What you instinctively accept as normal for yourself becomes the blueprint life uses. This is why two people can face the same situation and experience completely different outcomes. Each is filtered through a different self-image. When identity shifts, effort naturally decreases. You don't convince the world of who you are, you express it. A person who knows themselves to be confident does not try to appear confident. A person who knows themselves to be worthy does not seek permission or validation. Their behavior flows effortlessly because it is congruent with their inner state. The outer world reads that congruence and responds accordingly. This also explains why affirmations fail when they feel forced. Words spoken from an old identity carry no weight. You cannot override a deeply held self-concept with surface-level statements. The real work happens when you quietly accept a new assumption about yourself and begin to live from it inwardly. The moment you identify as the one who has rather than the one who hopes, reality starts reorganizing without struggle. Identity does not change through willpower, it changes through acceptance. The instant you allow yourself to be the person you desire to become, the world receives the instruction. You don't wait for proof before assuming a new identity, the assumption creates the proof. This is why waiting feels endless and alignment feels immediate. One delays ownership of self, the other claims it now. Your circumstances are not personal judgments or random outcomes, they are reflections. They show you, with remarkable accuracy, who you believe yourself to be, and the moment you revise that belief, not intellectually but internally, the reflection must change. Life has no option but to comply, because it is not reacting to your effort, it is responding to your identity. Waiting is not a neutral state, even though it often disguises itself as patience or humility. At its core, waiting is an assumption of absence. It quietly declares that what you desire is not yours yet, that it exists somewhere outside of you, separated by time, circumstances, or permission. The moment you enter the state of waiting, you affirm lack, and life faithfully mirrors that affirmation back to you, not because you are doing something wrong, but because reality is always echoing your inner position. When you believe you are waiting for something to happen, you place yourself downstream from life. You become an observer instead of a participant, a hopeful spectator instead of an owner. This subtle shift matters more than most realize. Ownership carries certainty, waiting carries dependency. Says, "This is mine," the other says, "This will be mine if conditions allow." And life responds precisely to that distinction. People often confuse alignment with inaction. They think not waiting means forcing outcomes or rushing timelines. But the opposite is true. Waiting is tense. It watches the clock. It measures progress. It looks for signs. Alignment is relaxed. It does not scan the horizon for proof, because proof is no longer required. When something is truly accepted as yours internally, you don't monitor its arrival. You expect it. The mind that waits is constantly negotiating with reality. It asks, how long will this take? What if it doesn't work? What else should I do? These questions keep attention anchored in uncertainty. But the mind that knows is settled. It moves forward without emotional dependency on outcomes, because the outcome is already assumed. This is why those who stop waiting often see results appear suddenly. Nothing magical happened in the external world. The internal posture changed. Waiting also fragments power. It places authority in future moments, other people, or external events. It suggests that something outside of you decides when you are allowed to have, be, or experience. But the moment you withdraw that authority and claim possession inwardly, the dynamic shifts. You are no longer asking life for permission, you are expressing a decision. Life responds to decisions far more quickly than it responds to requests. This does not mean ignoring reality or denying present conditions. It means refusing to let them define your state. You can acknowledge where you are without identifying with it. You can observe delay without assuming denial. The difference lies in where you stand internally. Are you positioned as the one hoping or the one who knows? The moment you release waiting, time loses its grip on you. Time becomes a bridge instead of a barrier. Events unfold naturally because there is no inner resistance slowing them down. The absence of waiting removes friction. It allows life to move unimpeded toward the expression of what is already accepted as true. To stop waiting is not to demand immediacy, it is to live from possession rather than pursuit. It is the quiet decision that what you desire is already yours in essence, and therefore no longer something you chase. When that decision is made sincerely, the sense of lack dissolves, and with it, the very delay you thought you were waiting on. Feeling is not a byproduct of experience. It is the language through which experience is created. Long before an event takes shape in the visible world, it exists as a felt reality within. This is why emotion carries such creative weight. The feeling you consistently return to becomes the atmosphere you live in, and that atmosphere determines what can appear. Thoughts may suggest possibilities, but feeling gives them permission to become real. Most people wait for circumstances to improve before allowing themselves to feel differently. They believe confidence, joy, relief, or gratitude must be earned through external success. But feeling does not follow events, events follow feeling. The moment you occupy the emotional state that would naturally accompany your desire fulfilled, you step into alignment with its reality. Feeling is the seal that marks an inner assumption as complete. This does not mean emotional intensity or forced positivity. A quiet, natural feeling is far more powerful than exaggerated excitement. The feeling of ownership is subtle, it is calm, it carries a sense of normalcy rather than drama. When something is truly yours, it no longer creates emotional spikes, it creates stability. That stability is what impresses the subconscious and signals completion. Forced emotions reveal doubt. When someone strains to feel happy or confident, they are often compensating for an inner belief that the desired state is not yet real. True feeling arises effortlessly when the assumption is accepted. It does not need to be maintained through effort, It sustains itself because it is congruent with identity. This is why rehearsed affirmations feel hollow when the feeling behind them is missing. Feeling also explains why repetition without engagement produces little change. You can imagine scenes endlessly, but if the emotional tone remains unchanged, the inner state has not shifted. The creative act happens when the feeling of fulfillment is reached, even briefly. In that moment, the desire is no longer future based, it becomes present tense, and presence is the only point of power. The body often responds before the mind fully understands. A relaxed breath, a sense of relief, a quiet confidence. These are indicators that the feeling has been accepted. When the body relaxes, resistance dissolves. The nervous system no longer signals lack or urgency. This physiological shift is not incidental, it is part of the creative process. A settled body reflects a settled assumption. Once the feeling is impressed, detachment happens naturally. You don't let go because you are trying to manifest faster. You let go because there is nothing left to chase. The emotional disappears. Desire transforms into expectancy. This is why those who feel fulfilled internally often appear unconcerned about outcomes. They are not indifferent, they are complete. Feeling does not require constant attention, it only needs to be genuine. A single moment of true acceptance outweighs hours of mental effort. When the feeling aligns with the assumption, reality receives a clear instruction. From that point forward, the external world reorganizes in its own time, not as a reward for effort, but as a reflection of the state you have already claimed. Faith is often misunderstood as an emotional surge or blind optimism, but in practice it is far quieter and far more demanding. Faith is loyalty to an inner decision when nothing in the external world seems to support it. It is the discipline of remaining aligned with what you know internally, even when appearances contradict you. This kind of faith does not rely on excitement or reassurance, it relies on consistency. It is the choice to stand by an unseen truth without constantly seeking confirmation. Most people believe they lose faith when circumstances become difficult, but what really happens is that they begin to negotiate with appearances. They allow visible conditions to override the inner knowing they once accepted. The moment you ask the outer world to validate your belief, you shift authority away from yourself. Faith collapses not because the desire was unrealistic, but because attention moved from the assumed end back to the evidence of the senses. Remaining loyal to the unseen does not mean denying reality, it means refusing to let reality dictate your state. You can acknowledge facts without letting them define the outcome. The unseen is not imaginary, it is causal. What is unseen today becomes visible tomorrow, provided you do not abandon it prematurely. This is where most people falter. They assume that lack of immediate results means failure, not realizing that delay is often just the interval between assumption and expression. Faith requires emotional stability more than emotional intensity. It is not about feeling high, it is about staying steady. When your inner state remains unchanged despite external fluctuation, you demonstrate true belief. Doubt shows itself through emotional reactivity. Faith reveals itself through calm persistence. A person who truly believes does not argue, defend, or explain. They simply continue as though the matter is settled. This loyalty to the unseen reshapes behavior naturally. You stop making fear-based decisions. You stop overcorrecting. You stop chasing reassurance. Your actions become simpler and more aligned because they flow from trust rather than anxiety. You do not micromanage the process because you are no longer trying to make something happen. You are allowing what is already decided to unfold. The unseen only feels fragile when it is treated as optional. Once you treat it as final, it gains weight. The inner assumpti on becomes the reference point instead of external conditions. This shift in reference is what transforms belief into conviction. Conviction does not fluctuate with mood or circumstance. It remains intact because it is rooted in identity, not outcome. Every time you choose the unseen over appearances, you strengthen it. Every time you react to appearances, you weaken it. Faith is built through these small, quiet choices. It is not a dramatic declaration, it is a repeated alignment. And over time, what was once unseen becomes unavoidable, not because you forced it into being, but because you never stopped being loyal to it while it was still invisible. Rest is often mistaken for passivity, but in reality it is a position of authority. Rest only becomes possible when the outcome is no longer in question. When you know something is done, you stop straining to make it happen. The nervous system relaxes, the mind quiets, and effort gives way to ease. This is not resignation, it is completion. Rest is the natural state of someone who has already decided the end. Striving is a signal that the mind still believes the outcome is uncertain. It keeps checking, correcting, pushing, and planning, not because action is wrong, but because doubt is active. When the end is accepted internally, action becomes selective and inspired rather than compulsive. You move when it feels natural, not because you are afraid of falling behind. Rest removes urgency, and urgency is often what distorts a shone. In a rested state, clarity sharpens. You begin to recognize which actions are aligned and which are fueled by anxiety. Effort that once felt exhausting now feels obvious or unnecessary. This is why rest is powerful. It filters behavior. It eliminates the need to prove, convince, or overperform. When you are internally settled, you no longer waste energy trying to secure an outcome you already assume is yours. Rest also communicates trust. When you stop forcing, you demonstrate confidence in the process unfolding. This trust is not directed toward external systems or people, but toward your own inner decision. You are no longer attempting to manage every variable because you understand that the sequence is secondary to the state. Life arranges details far more efficiently when you are not interfering through fear-driven effort. Inspired action often emerges unexpectedly from rest. It does not feel heavy or strategic. It feels obvious, even effortless. You might speak to someone, make a move, or take a step that feels natural rather than calculated. These actions carry momentum because they are not burdened by desperation. They arise from alignment, and alignment carries its own intelligence. Rest does not mean inactivity. It means freedom from inattention. You can be productive, focused, and engaged while remaining internally calm. The difference is that your actions are no longer attempts to fix yourself or your future. They are expressions of who you already assume yourself to be. This is why they tend to be effective. There is no internal contradiction. When rest becomes your default state, resistance dissolves. The body no longer signals threat or lack. The mind no longer scans for problems to solve. This absence of resistance allows things to move more quickly, not because you demanded speed, but because nothing is slowing the process down. Effort born of fear delays. Ease accelerates. Power does not come from pressure, it comes from certainty. Rest is the embodiment of certainty. It is the quiet confidence that nothing needs to be chased, fixed, or forced. From that state, life responds cleanly and directly, not as a reward for doing less, but as a reflection of someone who no longer believes they must struggle to receive.